Welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by Emmy award-winning investigative journalists, Earth Files reporter and editor, Linda Moulton Howe, and world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters incident, John Burroughs. And now, leading off tonight's program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
In June 1996, when I was reporting about the unidentified bismuth and magnesium layered metal that allegedly came from the bottom of a wedge-shaped craft in 1947 at White Sands Missile Range, I received a call from longtime Utah Bigfoot, crop circles, and UFO researcher Ryan Layton. He wanted me to interview a rancher named Terry Sherman. 2 years before, in 1994, Terry and his wife, Gwen, had moved to a 480-acre cattle ranch in central Utah's Uinta Basin, south of Fort Duchesne, after the original ranch owners had left and eventually had died. It was not long before the Shermans noticed circles in their pasture grass and cattle missing and mutilated at the same time that unidentified aerial objects showed up in the skies day and night. On September 6, 2004, I interviewed Terry Sherman for Coast to Coast Radio with Art Bell. Terry told me about the box-shaped UFO craft that he and his family saw in the sky, quote, "Every time we've had a cattle mutilation, without exception, we've seen these box-shaped craft. It just propelled itself along maybe 12 to 15 feet above a road that goes through the ranch," close quote. Terry Sherman also described a bigger craft that he and his whole family saw. Quote, "We've seen one that has holes, 4 holes or doors or lights or whatever you want to call them. We thought for a long time they were just lights, but after looking with binoculars at a very short distance from this craft, you can see depth and you can see into the holes. It looks to be just lights, kind of an auburn to orange, maybe glowing inside the holes. And when the doors or these holes are shut, you can see a spiral. The spiral comes covering whatever is over the lights, and then it spirals open and spirals shut. We saw a craft coming in and out of one of these orange holes. After we saw the craft above a field on the ranch, we tried to guess its size by measuring up the field. It was about 100 yards wide and about 300 yards long. That's 300 feet by 900 feet. That's the only real thing we've had to try to figure out how large the craft is. One night, Terry Sherman saw big orange lights on a large craft hovering right above a field, and he started running toward it. Terry Sherman told me that he, quote, "I suddenly had the impression that I was in 2 places at once. First, on the ground looking up into the craft at 2 humanoid men. Then suddenly I'm inside the craft where the 2 humanoids are arguing. He heard one of them say, quote, 'It wouldn't do any good if we tried to explain to him because he would never understand what we are doing,' close quote." After 2 years of feeling attacked and tricked and manipulated by the highly strange phenomena, the Sherman family wanted to escape all the high strangeness of their Utah ranch near Roosevelt and agreed in 1996 to sell their property to Robert Bigelow. He had established the National Institute for Discovery Science, known as NIDS, based in Las Vegas, Nevada, to study phenomena such as cattle mutilations and unidentified aerial objects. Later, Mr. Bigelow would also found Bigelow Aerospace, which works with NASA today on creating blow-up housing units for the Moon and Mars. During his ownership of the Sherman Ranch in the Roosevelt, Utah region, Mr. Bigelow hired scientists to study the animal mutilations, human abductions, glowing holes in the sky that seemed to be like portals between dimensions, crop circles in pastures, unexplained transport of large bulls into a trailer, and many more incidents of serious weirdness. Now, in September 2018, has come a documentary film by Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, who was given access to all the files and videotapes generated by Las Vegas Channel 8 investigative reporter George Knapp. He worked with scientists in the Bigelow investigation of the Sherman Ranch. After this short break, Jeremy Corbell will join us on Phenomenon Radio to dig into all of the bizarre and unexplained events that occurred in front of scientists and their equipment and their cameras. In the end, all of the scientists concluded, quote, "We still don't know what we are dealing with," close quote. The 2-hour documentary is called Hunt for the Skywalker, Hunt for the Skinwalker, which explores the haunted Sherman Ranch and the eerie Uinta Basin, where Ute Indians have long spoken of the dangerous skinwalkers that can take your cattle and may even try to take your soul.
You're listening to Phenomenon Radio live on KGRADB. Tonight's very special guest, Jeremy Corbell, will join the show right after these messages. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to KGRA's exclusive presentation of Phenomenon Radio Live with Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist and Earth Files reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe and the Bentwaters experiencer himself, Tech Sergeant John Burroughs. Tonight's very special guest, Jeremy Corbell, is on deck and ready to go. To start tonight's interview, here's Linda Moulton Howe. Linda?
Thanks, Race. And Jeremy, welcome to Phenomena Radio. John and I are really looking forward to talking with you about phenomena from the point of view of exploring that Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin in Utah.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be on your program. And yeah, it is the modern day Twilight Zone. It's incredible.
It is. And I remember when I was working on A Strange Harvest in Denver. This goes back to 1979 to 80. And that there was this Junior Hicks from the Uinta Basin in Utah who started calling me after A Strange Harvest had been broadcast. And he was talking to me about all of the cattle mutilations and UFOs, beams of light, strange creatures, even then in the early 80s. And one of the pieces that I remember he told me as my being a television producer in Denver, he said, the Ute Indians, and you had this sentence in your film, Search for the Skinwalker. He said, the Ute Indians have always, going back to their ancestors, referred to the Skinwalker carefully with some fear, but always in the category of extraterrestrial. Can you start today with laying out everything that you've learned about the relationship of the Skinwalker to the Ute Indians, what they thought, and then how this kept evolving into everything that you were doing on the Sherman Ranch?
Sure. I mean, it's a vast story, and that's a tall order, but we can start to crack into that. Essentially, the term Skinwalker, the film is titled Hunt for the Skinwalker. That mimics what George Knapp's and Dr. Colm Kelleher's book was that came out in 2005 under the same title. They used the term Skinwalker, and again, that was because of Junior Hicks. It was something that he said when he was walking George along the property, and he points up to the ridge, which is where a lot of high activity occurred, and he says, the locals call that Skinwalker Ridge. That was the first time George Knapp had ever heard of the term. I do want to say that you really broke this story before it was a story. Mm-hmm. You did a 1996 interview with the owners of the ranch before it was bought or purchased by Robert Bigelow. Right. So you know better than anybody that this story, as it started coming out and came to you and then spread out to the world, it's so powerful because it is about extraterrestrials or aliens. It's whatever it is alien to us. That is for sure. But it's so much deeper than that. The story goes so much deeper. And part of that is the lore of the culture. Right. So we're talking about skinwalkers. So in Native American lore by the Ute tribe, but also Navajo, the skinwalker is a trickster, almost like an pure evil medicine man, a shapeshifter. It's a catch-all term for all that's evil. So that is where the term comes from. It's from a curse. Bottom line, all of these things are kind of attributed to what they call the skinwalker from the local lore. Yet the experiences are distinctly, I guess you'd say, out of this world. We're talking about hard physical craft, poltergeist-like activity. We're talking about beings, entities, Bigfoot-type creatures.
And Jeremy, just two questions. What was their definition of why skinwalker, and how far back do you think that the skinwalker concept in the Ute and the Navajo went? And what were the old stories? Because just trying to even understand the name skinwalker is such a puzzle.
Right. Well, it's kind of a puzzle. The main thing here is that the skinwalker can take on any form, which I find so interesting. So that is the lore, the idea of a shapeshifter, that this entity that is pure evil, is the way it's seen, can walk in any skin, can take any form. So this goes back to, from what I understand, a curse by the Navajo on the Ute. They weren't exactly friends. However, these types of entities are throughout culture, as you know, and throughout history. Yeah. So we're just putting a name on something that has been there a long time.
Well, let's just go into your film for a second. I watched the whole 2 hours, and there were so many facets of high strangeness. And as the film unfolds, you begin to get settles into you. This eeriness about a geographic latitude, longitude, that the Uinta Basin in Utah has been famous for centuries, probably, of being an area of all kinds of strangeness and a lot of unexplained death. And when you get to the end of the film and your mind is looking back over the territory that you laid out in all of its complexities, the question that was left in my mind was, why would certain latitudes and longitudes on this earth, because this is not the only one, be associated with something that shifts and shapes and is involved with the mutilation of animals without blood and all other kinds of high strangeness? Is it because it's an alien presence and it is based underground, under the surface of the Uinta Basin?
Right. I have literally no idea. However, I do find it fascinating that there are places on this earth where they say the world is thin, almost like there's a perforated reality between our reality and a reality which may actually be ever present and may have been here a lot longer than humans. So maybe we are the visitors in someone else's realm and we're just seeing that pop through from time to time. Absolute speculation, because I have no idea. And anybody that says they know for sure, they're wrong. So the question is, what is going on in this area of high strangeness where there's smoke, there's fire, and there are generations of extremely high activity of what we'd call UFO, but also creatures, things that don't fit nicely into the UFO hypothesis of extraterrestrials visiting our planet. It does seem like there's a porthole or a way things are popping through in this location. But again, we really don't know. And that's the fly in the ointment, as Dr. Colin Kelleher said in the film, that it doesn't fit a perfect, pretty picture of just extraterrestrial visitation. However, that might be a part of it. We don't know.
And Jeremy, all of our listeners at Phenomena Radio, if you are at a computer listening and you have the ability to do a search, type in your search bar the word dire, D-I-R-E, wolf. And the dire wolf, this story, can you take us right back to the very beginning of how Terry, and I think it was his son, or it was father and son, they had guns. They had access to a 30-06, a 357 Magnum, and talk about from the beginning of what was happening and what showed up and what ensued.
Sure. So this is featured in my film as described by Dr. Colin Kelleher. And I do want to say, when you watch my film, you've read the book, hopefully, by George Knapp and Dr. Kelleher, but this film brings to life moments on the ranch during the active investigations. This is footage that can never occur again, and you get to see it as it unfolds. In the film, there's a moment where Dr. Kelleher is talking us through this experience. And I'm going to refer to them as the Gormans. I know the name is already out, but it's just, I'm not going to contribute to them, having their lives turned upside down anymore. So I'll
clarity, the Shermans asked to be called Gorman, or somebody named them Gorman, but the Sherman and Gorman are the same. And when I did the interview, it was with Terry Sherman.
Okay, got you. You're right. So it is the same. So in the state of the book, the Gormans. So there they are, and they arrive to the property, and it's basically their first moment, and they're driving up, and it's picturesque. It is a beautiful property, by the way, and it's absolutely picturesque, and it is beautiful. And so there they are, and they're going to be raising their Seminole cattle, and this is a big deal as ranchers, as cattle ranchers. So they're coming up, and as they park, up walks to them, as reported by them, a wolf. I mean, not a dog, but a huge wolf, described as coming chest high from its back. So we're talking an extraordinarily strange sized wolf with kind of sentient blue eyes, something like that. This animal comes up and it almost is very docile, as if it's tame. And they're thinking, wow, who has a wolf out here? The wolf then, kind of sits around by the car, and in a moment of ferocity, grabs one of these cattle, one of these calves. The calf puts its head between the bars of the corral, which is this really interesting corral right by the drive port, and it snaps onto its head and starts tearing at it, trying to pull this calf through the bars. And so at that point, obviously to protect his livelihood and his assets and his animals, this is when the owner of the ranch at the time goes and tries to separate this beast animal from, his calf. And, first he hits it with a large stick, kicks it, tries to get it off, things not budging. And then, as you kind of described, ends up taking a number of shots at it from closer and closer range, from a pistol to a major caliber rifle. And it took about 6 different shots, as is reported in the story, and nothing. And finally, the animal, which should have been dead a long time ago, I mean, these rifles can take down an elk or a bear at the highest caliber, finally lets go of the calf and just kind of like saunters off, kind of looking back. There was a piece of flesh that came off the animal, but they are not UFO investigators. They don't even know anything strange is really going on at the ranch yet. So they said it smelled like dead or rotting flesh, but they didn't keep the sample. Off walks the animal. Terry was a tracker. He tracked it. And when he, found where the animal should be, the tracks just lifted off as if it was elevated or disappeared. And it was extreme high strangeness at the very moment that they entered the ranch, and they still don't have an explanation. And that was unsettling to them, quite unsettling, obviously.
And Jeremy, why I mentioned that dire wolf for you want to see is because in your film, when they, I guess part of what they were examining were those tracks. And that working backwards into the history of wolves, the only one that Terry Sherman picked out as being the closest to what walked up and grabbed his calf was the dire wolf, which was extinct 10,000 years ago.
Exactly. So that was what he and his wife both picked out from kind of a lineup of what type of wolf, it could have been, because there are native wolves there. And unknowingly, they both picked out the dire wolf, which as you just said, has been extinct. But this is not uncommon for the area to have animals appear on the ranch that actually leave physical marks on their cattle that appear to be from another time.
And that is one of the questions that I wrote down. Can you go into this idea that a latitude, longitude, like the Sherman Ranch in the Uinta Basin, where eyewitnesses have seen what look like holes in the sky that seem to tunnel, and that the hypothesis is that right there, for reasons that are not clear, that there is dimensional doorways that open and close. And if they are, if space can be bent, time can be manipulated. What kind of discussions did you and the scientists and the people who live there have about the whole possibility that it's like a crossfade in the Uinta Basin between time here and time someplace else?
Right. So the scientists, both from the NIDS era of study, the private industry study, and what we'll get into as the BAS era, or the Defense Intelligence Agency study, which we will get into, the scientists from both of those time periods, some of which there's a crossover, that is one of the big theories, that there is a distortion, a perforated reality, a temporal, a dimensional kind of break. They don't know. It's hard to even define that. Yet that is a theory to a high degree, because that is kind of what we're witnessing, is these objects and beings, creatures, coming out of three-dimensional, geometric, inverted, orange glowing portholes that you can only see through infrared. So if we are to believe the reports from these scientists as that being one of the functions we see happen at the ranch and surrounding the ranch, then we do have to consider the possibility that what we're seeing is temporal or dimensional distortion. However, let's look at this for a second. Any time that you are distorting gravity, you are distorting time and space, period. So what is going on there might just be in essence, something that is being perceived because of physics, because of some reason. The physics is different right there, and we're just seeing it this way. I don't know. That is a theory, a popular one amongst the scientists. But again, it's not just the ranch. And I want to stress this. The ranch is a great living laboratory. It is very convenient, and it was used and is used, even in its third scientific study now, as a living laboratory in an area that is just pocked and punctuated with these incredible, incredible tears in reality.
Can I stop you right there? Did you say the DIA came in and investigated this?
Oh, absolutely. That's something we should talk about, because the New York Times absolutely got it wrong with their announcement in December of 2017. It may be not their fault, but I want to clarify that. The primary reason for the $22 million allocated to what we've been told was to ATIP, which is not correct. There was a bigger mother program. ATIP was more of an assignment. The $22 million was allocated because of, and primarily for, the study of Skinwalker Ranch by the Defense Intelligence Agency under the Defense Warning Office in the name of OSAP and then ATIP. So the story... Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, finish.
Well, just the story that people got was incorrect, and I do want to clarify that, because my film does break that story. It breaks that news.
Well, is that what, at the end, when George Knapp says that there is an agency that cannot be named that was interfacing between ATIP and BAS, is that what you're talking about?
Not exactly. What we can say now publicly is that OSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, that was kind of the host financier via Harry Reid, and that program then paid out to BAS as the contractor by Bigelow to study primarily the ranch, but other things as well, as an active UFO and beyond program, where ATIP was passive and based on military experiences. There are other
Jeremy,
programs.
So who headed that? Who was the head investigator for the DIA?
It wasn't like that. It wasn't structured like that. It was a DIA contract. And in that DIA contract, it was awarded to BAS. BAS was set up, and best person to do it was Robert Bigelow, who put a bid on the contract, a public contract, public bid, and won it because he had the most experience and he was willing to put his own money into this through the DIA contract. He was willing to build skiffs and to retrofit his entire Bigelow Aerospace to work at that classification level.
Right. But who did they hire? The scientific people and the investigator. DIA doesn't give out money and not send an agent out to investigate it. Who was the lead agent?
Well, that's not public information at this time. However, you can read the BAS contracts. George has released a lot of that information publicly now. You can see the exact scientific papers that were generated for the DIA. And I think somewhere one of the names was leaked of the DIA agent who was in charge to some degree. And I'm not going to contribute to that. But I think if you do a lot of internet research, you will find a name associated with that.
Okay, so but why did they pick the DIA? Why was this? My first question is what was there that they gave to Harry Reid and company that they got the DIA interested in to come out and spend over, I guess, the majority of the money. So what you're saying is ATIP really didn't get any money. They just got to look at some
That's
video.
not what I said. That's not what I said, but I will clarify. ATIP was a benefactor and a communicator in some way with OSAP. Absolutely, but not the way that it's been advertised. I will answer your question about the DIA to the degree that I can, which is that how this all started was since Bob Lazar, Harry Reid, being a Nevada-based senator, Harry Reid has always had an interest because he basically knew Bob was telling the truth. So,
so right there, that's something that'll get passed over all the time. How did he basically know Bob was telling the truth?
Right. So
Please clarify that.
Yeah. So I need to explain the story for you to understand the whole thing. So because of Harry Reid's personal interest in the Bob Lazar story, due to George Knapp essentially telling him, hey, there's this guy, he came out, his name is Bob Lazar, and Harry Reid looked into it on his own. And Harry absolutely believed Bob's story had integrity through a number of reasons, through a number of years, but that's not the story we're on right now. I'm giving you the setup of how the DIA got involved. So there he is, Harry Reid, over years, talking with George Knapp. Every time George Knapp would interview him for Nevada, they would step aside and they would talk about their favorite pet little project of UFOs. So it started with the Lazar era, but it continued over decades. So what happened is there's Harry, and George writes a book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. He tells him all about Bigelow. He tells him about what's going on, trying to get support in what's going on. In general, thinks this is an important topic of study. Harry Reid then contacts a number of people in the DIA, and he says, I really think you should check out this area. Think about it this way. You have what appear to be portholes with creatures coming through. You have craft flying through rips in the sky with a different sky on the other side. You have to imagine the Defense Intelligence Agency would be interested if this is A, a psychological thing that's occurring, or B, if there's actually soldiers and craft being deployed through dimensional portholes. Are you kidding me? What country would not want that technology from a defense intelligence strategy? So there you go. You get these DIA guys being sent to the ranch, and we're talking about badass military DIA guys being sent there to check it out. So there they are, and sure enough, the phenomenon makes sure that they have an experience, a hands-on, direct, personal experience.
And explain what happened.
Well, before I do, I want to ask one question before you do. Did any of this get captured by the Defense Intelligence Agency? Did it get captured on film? Do they have any evidence of this happening other than the people claiming what they witnessed?
Right. So, I mean, if you watch my film, you will quickly see that a big point of the film was that whatever this is appears to be a sentient and maybe precognitive intelligence that is very aware of our technology, and whether you like it or not, oftentimes opts out from selfies on Twitter or Instagram. I mean, it is constantly elusive. This is what Bigelow ran into, and in fact, this is what the Defense Intelligence Agency ran into. However, there are things that were physical, tangible proof that occurred. For example, not to get too far off track, but I'll throw this down before moving forward. If you get a mutilated corpse of a human with its internal organs torn out, drained of blood, and missing an ear, you'd consider that physical evidence. Just the fact that we have an animal doesn't mean it's any less of physical evidence. But again, let's not go down that rabbit hole quite yet. I do appreciate your question, John, but let's stick to the point.
Okay, and one other point I want to ask before we go forward, because this won't come up probably later. Anybody there with the DIA get injured during this operations? Because it was a DIA operations, right?
Yeah, it was. As I said, the second scientific study that was done by BASS was a Defense Intelligence Agency operation wholly. We have documents for that. The Defense Warning Office, it was under them. Yes, and this is what OSAP was. This is what was created. So that is public knowledge. George has put out some DIA documents to prove that. So absolutely. Now you're asking, did anybody get injured?
Did anybody during the encounter get injured?
What I'll say is psychological injury. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but yeah, I'd say people were highly disturbed. But no, the whole thing that people are physically injured through all this, it could be true. I personally do not feel that I have seen conclusive evidence that there has been direct injury from the phenomenon. However, I'm open to being wrong. Psychologically, absolutely, people were followed by what the Defense Intelligence Agency and NIDS called hitchhikers, which is where the phenomenon seems to attach itself to you and torment yourself and the family, even if you move through multi-states, like they did with Terry Sherman or the Gormans, and like they also did with the DIA agents. Let me answer your question. Defense Intelligence Agency. So I got through the part with Harry Reid, and I got through the part of how it came up with George Knapp, and they sent agents to the ranch, and this is how it all started. They had their own personal experiences. And then Linda asked, what were those experiences?
Yeah.
So let me just give you one, which is the experience that initiated everything, and I think I can talk about this without being too out of school. There was an agent in particular who went there, and as he's interviewing the people at the ranch, he looks over their shoulder and he sees what looks like a metal Mobius loop just presenting itself physically right there. He can see it with his eyes. He doesn't mention it to the current people that lived at the ranch, and he sees it and it presents itself even with some, I believe, some hieroglyphics on them.
And Jeremy, just for a second, a Mobius is something that would possibly look like an infinity sign in the sky.
It was very, very similar to that, metallic and with some hieroglyphics. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school because I do believe George Knapp has reported on this reluctantly. I think he's done that. So yes, that is what was reported. That was one of the number of personal events by agents of the DIA that then did say something is going on there. And then they ended up talking with Robert Bigelow, and they realized that there is a huge opportunity because they were and are aware of these perforated realities. They're aware of these locations. They have actually identified a number of locations, from my knowledge, that where this type of thing occurs. So high UFO activity, what appears to be paranormal-like activity, mutilations, as well as, just incredible violence to animals in general. So all of this,
Jeremy, can I ask you another question? Because
anytime,
this is stuff that gets passed over and people later on question why it wasn't brought up.
Yes.
Okay, you're saying, to your knowledge, the DIA knows of numerous locations or several locations where this type of activity takes place.
That is the knowledge that I have. I am very confident with saying that Skinwalker Ranch was one of multiple locations looked at by the Defense Intelligence Agency under the OSAP banner.
Do you know what some of these other locations are?
I'm aware of a couple of them. I think so is the public. I think that one of those locations is what's the valley? You know it, Linda.
In the United States or beyond?
In the United States.
Well, let's see. There's an area in Sedona, I know, that has magnetic field anomalies and.
Well, bottom line, it's okay. Whatever. I'm just blanking on one of the names, but yeah, there are multiple locations. I am aware of like maybe two of them, but there's a list apparently. Because look, they looked. The Defense Intelligence Agency went off of basic understanding that people had. They even looked at Dulce and that kind of thing. And they were trying to see if there were other high activity areas. And that's why George wrote the book. That's why Bigelow allowed him to write the book with Dr. Kelleher, was to identify more locations. And they did through OSAP, through the DIA.
And do you know, or did you ever get any feedback from any of the DIA people that they actively work with technology to prevent magnetic fields from collapsing at certain longitudes, because they know that when magnetic fields naturally collapse, something from another dimension can come in here?
I have no knowledge of that.
Well, it is part of this story.
Well, one other question, and then I'll let you get back to your story. Okay. So these agents, were they aware of these other locations prior to coming to Skinwalker, or did they learn about them through NIDS and other things when they arrived at Skinwalker?
Oh, that's a fascinating question, and I don't know the answer to it. From my research and what I've been able to uncover through making this film personally, on a personal note, I became very aware that these programs were active well prior to the DIA program through OSAP, and ATIP was in existence prior to when it's said to have been in existence. And I know that personally by individuals who were in position to know and have confided in me off record that ATIP went by another name. So as far as I know, they could have been very aware of this, but I don't know for sure. I just know the programs were existing and do exist now, and sometimes by different names.
And before you go in further, there are DA documents that George Knapp has released.
Yep,
to
they're
support
online.
The fact that the DIA was involved. And on one other question before you go to the story, are they still actively involved?
Yeah, yes. So to answer your first question, absolutely. Those documents were released in a news report. I can obviously send you a link to them. But George, there's 3 documents in particular that even define the programs that were done, the scientific papers that were generated for this. But yeah, 2 in particular with Defense Intelligence Agency written on the front of them that talk about OSAP and what they did. There's more to come, I'm sure. That's all I'll say about that. But there's more to come. You know, I don't think someone like George announces something without really great stuff to back it up. And to a degree, it's already been backed up. I don't remember your second question, but absolutely.
Are they still doing this now? Are they still investigating?
Yes. Okay, so that's really important. So think about it this way. It was released by the Pentagon in a 3 to 4 part script done by 3 or 4 different Pentagon press agents, these lines that were said. One of the lines that were said, I collected them all and compared them, by the way. So I'm very clear what the script is. I made a copy of it. These are the 4 statements they made, the Pentagon, about this program. ATIP. One of the things they tried to do was mess up the name. They tried to tell people it was Advanced Aviation Weapon, and that's BS.
But that's wrong. It's aerospace.
It's absolutely wrong, but that's part of the sleight of hand they were trying to do. They should know because it was a Pentagon program, and we now have documents that prove that. That is part of what George put out. We proved that. So now you have to already look at the Pentagon spokespeople and say, what else are they telling us that's BS? Another thing they said, by the way, every one of the 4 statements they made was BS. So one of the things they said was that it ended in 2012. Think about that for a second. If you believe that for a second, then why is the gimbal video from 2015, right? That's obvious that they didn't stop collecting data in 2012. And in fact, Lou Elizondo says that when he left the program, it was still going. It is still going. When you change a name or you change funding sources, does not change the fact the same people are in control of the same subject. So yeah, it's still going on. And in fact, John, I will tell you this now, and I will be proven right later, but I'll put it on the record now, that there are multiple UFO programs going at this time that are not being named right now. And there are 4 in particular that will probably come out.
Right. And was Lou Elizondo then working for ASAP before he was assigned ATIP?
So that's a little complicated, and Lou should probably answer that for himself. OSAP was basically a funding contract set up through the Defense Intelligence Agency in order to handle the study that Bass bid on and ended up doing, which focused on the ranch, but then went broader into associated UFO phenomenon. ATIP itself, from my knowledge, was in existence prior to that it focused on military engagements, and that it was a reactionary program, meaning as data came in, like with Commander David Fravor, which, by the way, let's get clear on that. I broke that story on Coast to Coast months before the New York Times. I'm friends with Commander Fravor, and that story I reported on months prior. Huh. And people don't know that, but it's on the record. So, and how did I know? 2 years prior to the New York Times going out. And that was because of these contacts. It allowed me in and let me get close to everybody in this military experience. It was so important because it's the tip of the spear that we have now for our government saying something happened out there, and there are craft that are beyond ours that no nation we know of no tail numbers, no advanced propulsion that we know of. And it's flying with impunity in our airspace. So kind of going out from beyond what we're talking about, it is all connected because that was part of ATIP, was collecting reports like that and then starting to analyze them. So naturally, they were going to communicate with OSAP, if that explains it.
And
but one other thing real fast, Linda. Let me ask this, please. Let me ask this, okay? The fallacy, and you've worked with these guys, is this wasn't something that they just started investigating. Any kind of unknown in the sky is going to be investigated immediately.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is when they investigated on the initial footings, they couldn't figure it out, and that's when they kicked it over to somebody that had more expertise in it.
Well, it's actually much bigger than that because remember, everything is so compartmentalized. So here's the deal. You have, this is being investigated. What does that mean? We knew that if I looked at this from multiple points of view, talking with multiple different agencies and individuals who looked at this tic-tac experience, Commander Fravor wasn't told that prior to his engaging this AAV, that they had been watching these for over a week. They had been capturing them on multiple forms of radar, that they have been seeing these things en masse descend from 80,000 feet, which is the top scan of the radar volume. It's 80,000 feet. It's coming from space, dropping down to 50 feet above the water in a matter of seconds. Dave Fravor wasn't told about that. He was told to engage an AAV. So my point is, there is so much more to this story that has yet to be really understood. But it is fascinating that ATIP used this as the tip of the spear, that Lou Elizondo used it as the tip of the spear when coming forward about this information.
And what I was going to say is the acronym BASS. Tell the audience what that acronym stands for. It's Bigelow.
Yeah, so BASS, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Space Studies, or Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies.
Okay. And if I have understood, then ASWAP was the, we'll call it above what was happening with ATIP. And BASS got the money, though, from, did it get the money from ATIP or ASWAP?
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to break these down for everybody in a very logical way, because this is, these acronyms, which are, kind of supposed to make it a little bit easier, sometimes make it a little bit more difficult. So you have OSAP, which is Advanced Aerospace Systems Application or Weapons Systems Application Program. So OSAP is kind of the funding source. Now, from that funding source, you have BASS, which is kind of what came after NIDS. NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, that was a private program by Robert Bigelow. But then BASS was a specific DIA program. It was specifically designed for this DIA contract, Defense Intelligence Agency contract. And BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced, Space Studies, that was created to take money from OSAP through the bid to study this stuff. ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, I am telling you, that was in effect prior to this and will continue to be in effect after this, even if it changes names. And that was a reactionary program. So I hope that clarifies all these funny acronyms that are supposed to make it easier.
So ATIP is still going.
It is my understanding, and it's reported by Lou Elizondo, that he has no information to the contrary.
And BASS is functioning as the maker of the blow-up building or houses for the moon and Mars and the Lagrange points, right?
I don't know. Are there? I really don't know that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well, Bigelow Aerospace, I don't know which acronym is funding and has, but Bigelow Aerospace and BASS have been one and the same thing.
Right. Yeah, it's hard for me to distinguish, but yeah, like what we can say is, I think you're right. So BASS is basically, look, it's an advanced space studies. So they're making inflatable habitats right now. I mean, really cool what Bigelow is doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it is. And then so now what we've identified is that the Defense Intelligence Agency has had a great deal of interest in the issue of, are there portals that can either be provoked between dimensions, or there are natural openings because of magnetic field collapses on the Earth and possibly other ways, but that trying to study anywhere there might be a portal, a link, a physical connection between this reality and another reality, it comes right back to the whole point of what was happening at the Skinwalker Ranch, right?
I mean, what's interesting is that from my understanding, the Defense Intelligence Agency has had a hand in a lot of the extraterrestrial programs for a long time. That's something that I've started noticing as I kind of research this and talk with individuals who maybe won't go on camera. It appears that there has been this kind of back and forth of power between the DIA and a couple other government agencies who kind of has custodianship of this. But here, let me throw a monkey wrench in here, which is that part of the reason why the study ended up being shut down, the basic study, ran its course, 22 million. The reason why it kind of got shut down, very specifically, some of the Defense Intelligence Agency individuals overseeing this program started to come from the perspective that what we were seeing was demonic, and that fear of demons, that total cosmology is what really crushed that program in that form at that time. And I think that's important to note, that the human element comes into these studies, even at government agency levels. And there was opposition to congressional hearings. There was opposition to all sorts of these, what I would call progressive ideas, because they believe we're dealing with demons.
Well, now, a demon, by definition, historically, some spell D-A-E, like a daemon. They are supposed to be able to translate themselves through matter. And that's one of the characteristics of demons. That comes to what I think is the most astounding story of everything in your film. And wonder if you could explain to an audience what happened to all of those huge bulls.
Oh, that's a brain teaser of a story. Look, there are so many events that occurred on the ranch that deserve their own, telling, their own story. This one, why I find this one so interesting is because it creates a twofold kind of brain teaser. One is it tells you, is this intelligence that seems to be manipulating the environment there, is it precognitive? And that is really important. So this story will exemplify that. Additionally, this story brings into focus, there is evidence after events like this, but evidence of what? And that's what we need to talk about. So I'll tell you the story real quick.
Yeah, one of them was that for this story to have occurred, matter went through matter in a way that is totally incomprehensible. So go ahead and tell the story.
Right. Yeah, that is one interpretation, if there's not a prosaic explanation. But yeah, that's the conclusion. So let's look at this. So there are the owners of the ranch, he and his wife, and they're thinking, oh, man, the last thing we need is for our top, 4 bulls to be messed with. They're in the corral right now. They're separated from the rest. And, man, that would really suck. So we're about to go out. Let's just check on them. So as they're driving out, as if this, phenomenon had predicted their fears, they're not there. In this small corral, the bulls aren't there. So, in goes the rancher into the corral. He's looking around at an instinct. He kind of looks at this kind of like a trailer that's butted right up against the corral, but it's all locked up. It's got these old, kind of hinges with rust on them, spider webs on inside and out. I mean, the thing had not been opened. And all 4 bulls are packed like sardines, body to body, shoulder to shoulder. And these are 1,000-pound bulls, big, burly, male mating bulls. And they're crammed in together in like a trance. He looks through a little crack and sees them. He yells to his wife, hey, I got him. Second he does that, they go berserk. They smash out this trailer, kick out a side door, and escape out. So the NIDS team looks at this event and they're like, okay, that's really bizarre. How do you do that? When they investigated the trailer itself, and you have to have some level of trust in these guys. I mean, they're trying to describe what happened under prosaic terms. They wanted to debunk this. A lot of the guys are hardcore scientists. And there was no entry point to this trailer. Obviously, the bulls thrashed it and they kicked it out. And the weirdest thing of all, is not only they were in trance, they were somehow moved, like you said, maybe matter through matter. Which, by the way, there's tons of stories of that. I've got other people on camera, like Janice, talking about how she had a horse she was braiding its hair 5 minutes ago, and then it's moved through a wall impossibly, and Fish and Game couldn't figure it out, and it was dead. So this kind of thing seems to happen out there. But the weirdest thing, what is the evidence? Okay, well, all of the bars, the corral, the metal bars, were highly, extremely magnetized. Like you could put a piece of iron against it and it'll hook on, but only for like 2 hours. So is that a function of whatever technology was used to transport or move these bulls into this little, trailer? Or what is that? That is evidence. That is physical evidence.
Right.
But evidence of what?
Well,
we have no idea.
Yeah, but that is such a good point, because that issue of if part of what the government for a long time has been trying to counteract is the natural collapse of magnetic fields that then open up portals and things can come in, then it means that magnetic field intensity is related to these portals. And it is possible that that magnetic field residue in that trailer was related to one of these, we'll call them portals, coming through with something that was able to magically put the bulls inside of a piece of matter without the bulls ever going into the trailer. It was. Yeah,
I mean, the technology is magical if you look at it from that perspective. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure
it'd be a translation of molecules like in Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm sure, like, it looks like magic until you understand the science of it. But yeah, that is one conclusion or way to look at it from your knowledge base of what you know. That puzzle piece fits. You know, from my knowledge base of that, I don't know anything about that. So it may or may not. I'm sitting here stumped. I have no idea out of my knowledge base.
And the scientists, it was so interesting to see Eric Davis and Colm Kelleher talking with bafflement about just about everything that they were trying to investigate.
It's absolutely incredible because especially like Colm, you know, he's very like straightforward, dry science. And he said to me one time, he's like, yeah, you know, the people thought we were dealing with demons. And I go, well, you know, so what? That's crazy, Colm. Explain it to me. And he starts explaining to me from a scientific perspective what it is that they encountered. And the more he's talking, the more it's sounding like demons. I mean, it was so funny. So I don't know. Everybody is perplexed, Linda. I wish we had the answers. It's so fascinating. That's why we're all interested in this, you know?
What is the third round now of science? It sounds like that the new owner, which you have portrayed very mysteriously in your documentary, there is now a new owner after Bigelow. Can you talk to us about, as well, we're about to go into a break. When we come back, talk about what has transpired after the round of the Bigelow investigations with scientists, and then it was sold to somebody new, and that this is one of the mysteries in your film. So, Race, take it away.
This 50-minute uninterrupted segment of Phenomenon Radio Live is brought to you by OnlineVibes.com, your personal connection to mind, body, and spirit, committed to connecting you with healing modalities that can manifest a true and healthy change in your life. Visit the website at OnlineVibez.com. Tonight's very honored and special guest, Jeremy Corbell, will rejoin the program for Hour 2 right after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to Phenomenon Radio Live. You're listening to it exclusively on KGRAradio.com, the KGRA digital broadcasting station, Salt Lake City, Utah. Before we can begin hour two of tonight's very, very intriguing interview with Jeremy Corbell, we've got to get to the news, and every week it's brought to us all by earthfiles.com. Here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Race. This week, on September 25th, 2018, NBC News reported that scientists think that they have now found the original home source for the mysterious Oumuamua space object that excited the whole world last fall. Remember, it was a year ago on October 19th, 2017. Astronomers around the world were stunned that what they called, quote, the first interstellar object to be seen by human eyes just passed through our solar system. The reason it was immediately considered to be interstellar was because it was moving so much faster relative to the sun when it first showed up. Because the Oumuamua object was first discovered by an astronomer at the Hawaiian Observatory, it was given the Hawaiian name Oumuamua, which means scout or leader in a battle. You can see illustrations of this very strange orbit at my news website, earthfiles.com. It provoked, in the way that this came in, coming from if you thought of our entire system as a sphere, it came from above the solar system. And that astronomers were saying it was the most, quote, extreme orbit on record. And the object, long, sort of cigar-shaped. It was calculated first at traveling at 56,880 miles an hour when it was coming down into our solar system. And then, to everyone's surprise, the object changed course, traveling at nearly 60,000 miles an hour and headed away from the Earth. They called it a hairpin turn. And not only did it go through a hairpin turn, its speed increased to 97,200 miles an hour. That's 27 miles a second. Stunned scientists hypothesized that the orbit and speed change on this hairpin were caused by sudden outgassings if Oumuamua were a comet or an asteroid with a lot of ice to melt as it warmed up during its trip past our sun and toward our planet. But it is still controversial. What was this, and why did this hairpin and speed up occur? Professor Avi Loeb, PhD, chairman of the astronomy department at Harvard University, told me in an interview last October that he and other astronomers were listening actively for any signals from Oumuamua object because there were speculations that it might be artificial in origin, that it might be a scout craft camouflaged as an asteroid or comet. He described the strange interstellar object this way, quote, Oumuamua was a dark red color and estimated to be about 800 feet long and 100 feet in diameter, long and narrow. It was rotating or tumbling as it moved forward at such a rapid clip, implying that it was relatively high density and perhaps made of metal. All of those intrigued Professor Loeb at Harvard. When I asked him if they got photographs and spectroscopy, he surprised me when he said, quote, well, no one got an actual photograph or spectroscopy of Oumuamua because it snuck up on us and came so fast, close quote. What was it? And where did it come from? Last year, one of the mysteries was that when scientists tried computer orbital calculations to track Oumuamua back to its origin point, no one was able to do it. But now, the new data from ESA, that's the European Space Agency's Gaia Spacecraft Observatory, is gathering data from more than 1 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy, and they have ended up with much more data. And when the Gaia data was run, Oumuamua ended up on a 1,000,000-year-old timeline that took the object within a couple of light years between 1 and 7 million years ago, and near 4 giant stars that were dwarf. They were dwarf stars, but large dwarf, and that they decided that any one of these 4 stars could have been the original home, and that the timeline that the computer showed is that whatever happened that kicked this out of whichever one of these solar systems it came from, that it may have happened 1 to 7 million years ago, and that is what came through at 90-some thousand miles an hour when it did a fast turn, and has left some people still wondering, what was Oumuamua? Was it natural, or was it artificial intelligence disguised as a comet or an asteroid? This is Linda Moulton Howe. Please stay tuned to Earth Files news updates on KGRA Radio, and visit every day my science, environment, and Real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com, for more unbreaking stories about our universe, this solar system, and the planet we live on.
And that's the news, and it's brought to you by earthfiles.com. Now back to the program. Linda?
Yeah, Jeremy, before the break, I was remembering how you have this fascinating segment in your film where the man is backlighted, the camera is cutting off the upper part of the face. You use one of those deep throat electronic distortions of the voice, and you introduce that there is now a new owner who purchased the Sherman Ranch from Robert Bigelow.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the very first question, he corrects me. I ask him, why are you keeping your identity secret? First thing I say to him. And he says, I am keeping my identity confidential because, and he explains very simply at the very beginning that he has a vast business empire, which is true. And in order to do a thorough job with the third major scientific study occurring right now at Skinwalker Ranch, that to not cross-pollinate those worlds is essential. And I agree with him. And so I am holding his identity confidential, as he said, which I would request that anybody would do, because it's going to help all of us later. He is about transparency. He is about getting information out, but you got to let the guy get the information. You got to let the guy study the ranch. So that's kind of what I'm hoping, that everybody does. And look, I want to address something too on your program, Linda. This movie has polarized people. I mean, people are just mean sometimes, And then I got super fans, and then I got people that are just angry. But I want to address some of the ridiculous.
Why are they angry?
It's a great question. I think that this story provides, a major conflict for people. They want their things to be proven true. So I think that might be it. But people were very polarized. I have never received so many physical threats to my well-being, nor love letters. People that are like, oh, it's an amazing movie. All I know is this has taken over social media. It has taken over the charts. The AP News just announced we are in the top 10 of independent documentaries in the world. Huh. So this movie has seen, and that was on AP News 2 days ago. So basically, this movie has seen a lot of success. But with that success, it's majorly polarizing. I mean, besides the things people say personally against me and about my filmmaking, they're attacking the film sometimes negatively, saying there's nothing new in this film. Oh my gosh, are you flipping kidding me? For the first time ever in history, you get to see footage from active investigations from the NIDS and beyond era. You get to see the first on-camera interview with Robert Bigelow talking about the ranch. That has never occurred before in history, has never been publicized. You have never seen it. You see it in this film. Additionally, you get to see the new owner, footage, modern day on the ranch. This footage is more restricted than Area 51. People have more images of Area 51 than they do of Skinwalker Ranch. So you're welcome. Okay. The new owner going on camera was a miracle. I couldn't believe it. So yes, I do hide and keep confidential his identity. But the whole point is he went on camera, and he went on camera to tell you what he's doing now. Yeah.
Which is what? What is he doing? What's the third round of science?
John sounds frustrated. Let's let him ask.
I do, because really what I want to know is what the third testing is. And
right, what Linda just asked. Okay.
Yeah, right, that's what I was trying.
Here we go. So the third round of testing, or I don't know, that was your words. The third study is now in progress, and there have been significant upgrades to all systems and methodologies with which they're doing these investigations. So we had the NIDS era, then we had the Bass era, and now we have the new owner. And again, these upgrades in technology, hopefully they're successful. But
as self-funded?
Yes.
So he's doing it on his own.
Up until this very moment, I'll say he's doing it on his own. However, there is ongoing interest by agencies in the ranch. I can tell you that. So what he's doing now is he's upgrading technology, and he's really trying to get data and video footage and try to understand it from even the geological abnormalities that are seen at the ranch. They are trying to document, as he said in my film, they're trying to document all of that. Now, the question is, if this is an intelligent phenomenon, if this is a precognizant phenomenon, then, and if it knows of our technology and doesn't seem to be very appealing that it wants to be on Instagram with us in a selfie, well, then we have a problem. Like Terry Sherman said, as you call him, as the rancher said, we need to treat this like an intelligent animal, and we need to hunt it and stalk it as if it's a sentient intelligence. So I don't know who's right, science or the rancher.
And Bigelow said at the end of the film that whatever they did, it outguessed them.
Oh, yeah. And it did so in hilarious ways. I mean, it had a sense of humor, I guess you could say, other than like eviscerating animals and just, liquefying dogs. I mean, the thing did have a sense of humor when it came to the scientists just kind of messing with them. At least we have to pretend it had a sense of humor, because some things were funny.
Like?
Well, like how Robert Bigelow said, they were outguessed every time. One of the farewell gifts that was given to the scientists, who tried to communicate with the phenomenon through rudimentary things like jacks and with cards and with, all sorts of things. You've got this ice circle that appears, and there's no rhyme or reason. It couldn't have been made by somebody kneeling on the ice with weight bearing, scratching this millimeter thin thing. We know it was made by tools. It's almost like it gives them something to think about, but it doesn't let them gain any major information, like a performance by a trickster. I mean, that's the way Robert Bigelow talked about it. These are performances, and what they're going to learn from it.
So do you have any inside information about whether the new owner is still working with the DIA?
At this moment, the new owner, what is understood is that the new owner has taken on this study through the purchase of the ranch to try to get more information and try to get down to the bottom of the mystery, like all of us want to. His dealings with the DIA or with Senate intelligence or anything he might be doing, that is something that would only come out through the new owner if he decides to let that out. But I think it's very premature to begin with. Let's give the guy a second to breathe. Let's give the guy a second to do some work. We will all benefit from it.
So what did the DIA learn on the Bass test? What's been made public on that?
Well, I think more and more is being made public about that. Again, everybody needs to absorb the basics of what I'm saying. The basics of what I'm saying, and so far, I have proven with George Knapp, is that OSAP was to study the ranch. The $22 million was not, they didn't give $22 million to ATIP. That's not how it happened. ATIP was there before. So OSAP was the beneficiary and through Bass. So what did they learn? Well, I think they came away from it in very similar, as NIDS, which is that here's a phenomenon. It does appear to be what we'd consider interdimensional. And the way I can say that, John, the reason I can say that is because when you look at the list of the 38 different scientific papers, that those papers very specifically deal with things like interdimensionality. So obviously they were looking at that. Obviously that was a big part of the study. So what did the DIA walk away with? Well, hopefully we'll see a much more thorough report from them.
I've got a question. Did the same scientists that were involved in NIDS work with the DIA this time?
Yes, some.
Okay, well, there are other scientists that haven't been identified.
Oh, majorly, about 50 plus.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, you can find out who some of those scientists were if you just read the documents that George Knapp released that list those different scientific papers. They have names associated with each paper. I'm surprised more people are not going after this lead.
Well, what about the papers? Have you read the papers?
I've read a number of the papers.
Can you summarize some of them for us?
Oh, gosh.
For our audience tonight?
Unfortunately, I'm not a big-brained scientist. However, if you look at the documents that George did release, and you look at the titles of the papers, I think that will be very telling in a way, because the titles of the papers deal with things like, vacuum energy applications or, aerospace propulsion, field effects of biological tissues, anti-gravity studies, superconductors and gravity research. I mean, there's just so wormholes in time space. I mean, these are the things that were studied under the Defense Intelligence Agency. So obviously these are the core questions that they have.
Let me ask you a question. Do you consider yourself an investigative reporter?
I'm a filmmaker and I do investigations.
Okay. Did you contact the DIA and ask them to comment on this film or on the papers that have been released through George Knapp?
Yeah, interestingly enough, so there was, I'm trying to think how to talk about this. I want to make sure it's cool, but yeah, George, when he released some of these DIA documents, he did reach out to the DIA. And obviously he got these documents, right? So we have to think about that. But through the DIA asking, what is the process to make sure these are totally unclassified, right? And they said they do not have a retroactive process once documents are in the hands of journalists, which I thought was really funny because that's crazy. But apparently they don't. So to answer your question, that has been done. And then also, obviously, there's people in the DIA informing this work. I mean, obviously, there's some way that I'm getting access to this information and George's getting access to this information. So that's pretty cool. I mean, to get heads up on certain things. I do know that the film has been passed around in intelligence circles and people that have been associated with the study of the ranch, which is very cool. I think people should watch it. I think they're proud of their work, in fact.
So is this been labeled, and you've done some background on this, is any of this considered national security?
I don't believe that we have broken any your dog might disagree. I don't believe that we have broken any national security issues. I mean, this has all been, very much documented in the open with support from a lot of people.
No, I didn't mean you guys. I meant, does the DIA and the people that study this say this has national security implications?
Well, that is precisely why they allocated the study and the $22 million through the Defense Intelligence Agency. That is their job. That is precisely why they're doing the study of Skinwalker Ranch and allocated that money. Is to, like I said before, Linda was laughing, but I'm serious. You have craft coming out of portholes and warriors and creatures crawling out. Oh my gosh, what a super army. Are you kidding me? You can insert, your agents, anywhere you want in the world with craft. I mean, that's a big question. So yeah, it's all about national security. And John, I do want to say, it's also science. It's scientists interested to figure out the nature of reality. That alone is incredible.
Did anybody ever say that they had any evidence that what was coming through portals or anywhere on our planet, they knew existed from another dimension or from a very far away part of our universe?
I think that any of that would be speculation, Linda, even if people do theorize that truly is speculation. So, of course, there are people that believe that. I don't know.
I've talked with whistleblowers who say that we have had an interstellar program since the end of the 1970s, all secret, and we can't have it without having allies that already know how to jump around the universe point to point, but that is a big, big part of the secret. that we already are in interstellar, moving point to point?
I certainly hope so. How cool would that be? I mean, I don't know, but man, I really hope so. That would make life so interesting.
Jeremy, okay, one of the things that's come up, you brought it up tonight, other people have discussed this, that there's people inside the DIA in the intelligence community that want to block this because we could be dealing with demons.
Yes.
Well, if you're looking at it from a military standpoint and you're trying to figure out what you said, can you drop in and out? Could they use this technology to move troops around and all that? Does it really matter if it's a demon or not? I don't understand that reasoning behind that. If you're trying to get down to the bottom of what this is, no matter what it is, why would you block people? Why would you want to not know what it is and then be able to study it to A, be able to utilize it, and B, if it is a threat possibly down the line, be able to control it if possible? You would want to know that, would you not?
I mean, John, I agree with you 100%. I have always been a mixed martial arts fighter. I am not an ostrich. I don't put my head in the ground and pretend the world is not, moving through the universe around me. So I agree with you, but that doesn't mean that everybody does agree with that. And there are strong religious, fundamental Christian beliefs that do block this type of research. And that's precisely what happened at some level with the DIA. And just being honest, just telling the truth, that's what happened. It doesn't mean that the studies have stopped. It's just that is a contentious force that we need to deal with if we want to get closer to the truth scientifically or beyond.
So they're scared to know if they're demons or not?
I don't know. I can't put it in such simplistic terms. All I know is that, there was serious opposition to the $22 million, to the study of Skinwalker Ranch, to everything we're talking about because of fundamental religious belief and the idea that we're dealing with demons. Now, it's fun to say. It makes the story really sexy and cool, but let's not get off point. The point is something is happening in the Uinta Basin and other places on this planet. We are being told a narrative. Back in December of 2017, the world learned that there was a secret Pentagon study of UFOs, and we learned that through the New York Times. Before that, we were told 1969, everything ended with Project Blue Book, although we decided and we actively said, well, that's probably not true. We now have definitive proof. But the real story is much bigger. There wasn't.
Yeah, but here's the problem, though. Okay, first of all, ATEP made sense. It wasn't that earth shattering, and what I mean by that is simply, it doesn't take anybody with common sense has got to understand it. Something that's flying around in the sky that can't be identified 100% is going to be studied and it's going to be looked at and it's going to try to be analyzed. Where is it from? And who is behind this and what's the technology? So that's not the shocking part of this to me. That's got to go on. Anyone who thinks the intelligence agencies aren't doing that on a daily basis is naive. The part that's stunning is that the majority of the money went to study a ranch and the DIA was involved in it.
I agree, John. I agree with you. I'm trying to make that point very loudly, is that there wasn't just one UFO study. There were two. And the Pentagon's other larger investigations delved into mysteries far more profound and disturbing than alleged alien aircraft like ATIP. It's focused on a living laboratory and paranormal hotspot known as Skinwalker Ranch. I am saying that clearly and loudly. And I agree with you that is very shocking. But that is the truth. That is how it went down. And there's more coming out about it, but there's been a lot already proved about that. We are telling the world this is the truth. And it is the truth.
Was Bigelow involved with NIDS or Bass in any other locations other than Skinwalker?
Oh, most certainly.
So they're well aware of these other locations and they've studied these areas?
Most certainly.
And none of those can be released as of now?
No, I think he has. I think, look, NIDS had a website for a while. Linda will remember that. Yeah. I mean, NIDS really put out a lot of information.
But it was not organized in the compartments we're talking about tonight.
Right. Not at all. NIDS was a private industry study, through Bigelow. But here's the deal. I mean, they looked at Dulce and they did papers of like flying triangles and they even debunked, a bunch of ranches and places where other people said. So I don't know exactly what the question is, but the point is that, yeah, there are other locations and NIDS did a great job of studying and so did Bass. And they did look at other places. Primarily, though, Skinwalker Ranch was the impetus and the location. Of course they looked at other places.
But was any of those other locations equivalent to Skinwalker's, where I'm trying to go with this?
It's a great question. And I would say the scientists that I've talked with have, said, look, it may just be that when you study a place, you start to notice this stuff. If you throw a dart at anywhere on the map, quiet the city noise, this phenomena could be occurring everywhere. They're not sure about that. There seems to be a heightened number of reports in places like the Uinta Basin, but they're not sure. We'd have to study everywhere to know.
And what about you mentioned, I think, in the film, that in some of the phenomena that they were questioning if they were dealing with holograms?
Well, there's one really kind of special part in the movie where I show some images of a twin tower apparition that seems to occur at the ranch. And this was the kind of thing that would occur that we could only assume it appears to be some sort of holographic projection. We don't know. Nobody knows. There's so little on that event in particular. But yeah, people wonder that. Are these projections? But the thing is, there's too much physical evidence. There's too many things for it to just be a holographic projection. A hologram might be a byproduct of something else.
That is a question relevant to that huge dire wolf-looking animal. Was it a sophisticated hologram that the human could not distinguish from organic? But that we are dealing on our world, as it comes up in the human abduction syndrome a lot, that there are holograms being projected by an alien intelligence that the human mind cannot discern.
How will we ever know? I mean, if a hologram is so perfect, it's like the Matrix. Eat the steak, tastes like snake. I mean, who knows? How will we ever know? But it is a fascinating idea.
Well, now it comes down, like sitting around that fire with people from DIA. Did you talk about the different types that come up in the abduction syndrome of blondes, of reptilians, of ebens, and that sort of thing?
No, we didn't get into that. I tried to stay very specific about the ranch. We have an individual in that scene who's a well-known pop star named Robbie Williams, and it was so cool because, he came to the ranch, he's friends of friends, and, he has very personally had these incredible UFO experiences. He's not afraid to talk about them, even though he's like a judge on the X Factor and internationally famous. He doesn't care. He's just telling you what happened to him. So at that campfire was kind of just a way to reminisce and talk about kind of our personal experiences. I loved that part of the movie. That's why I put that in there. But to answer your question, Linda, there's so much going on at the ranch immediately in front of your eyes. We didn't really theorize past that.
Well, I had a question about Dark Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
Have the Utes, or the Navajo, but the Utes especially there in the Uinta Basin, what is their perspective on this strange, eerie, dark canyon?
Right. So the reason we went there is because Dark Canyon, remember, all of this was off limits by the tribal elders. Nobody has ever been given right to go film there and take that footage off. We had to get special permits. All of that was because of George Knapp's great 20-year relationship, with the area and the people in the area and the tribe. So we got right to go film in Dark Canyon, and it is dark. You look at the film, I mean, it's just pitch black, thick forest, right? The reason we went there is because we were with two tribal guides, and that is an area where they say the Skinwalker lives, and it follows the river, the water, down past through Skinwalker Ranch and out towards Bottle Hollow and those areas. So that area specifically is known in native lore by the Ute tribe who occupy the area to be the home of the Skinwalker, which again is this shape-shifting evil entity that you're not even supposed to utter its name. So the fact we could go there, talk about it, film there, just from a cultural perspective, was huge.
And do the Utes or the Navajo have any explanation for why an evil Skinwalker would be there?
Well, I mean, it's because of a curse from the Navajo to the Ute tribe, from my understanding. But again, this lore, it goes back since the beginning of recorded human history, this idea of shapeshifters. But let me just say this. It's so funny, Linda. Like, you interview people and they start to trust you, and then they tell you the weird stuff because it's stuff that they don't want to tell you, because they can tell you about a craft maybe that they saw in the sky, but there's always more. As you know,
Yeah.
There's always more to the story. So as you kind of earn the trust from people over the years and you break that barrier of Native American culture, right, which is another huge barrier in trying to understand certain stories, naturally skeptical of outsiders, right? But once you start to do that, you begin to notice, like the guy Corey in my film, my favorite case, hard, physical, tangible craft, UFO. He could have jumped up and hit the tail end of it right there. And everybody in the basin saw the lights from his location where he saw this thing. Even that story, that was just the beginning. It projected into his mind as everything else went silent. You're going to really miss your family. You better go back inside. You're not supposed to be seeing this. Go back inside. And he did. So even in the Uinta Basin, where there's this Native American lore to try to describe what's going on, kind of like the miracle of Fatima, how we're trying to describe what's going on, but maybe technologically, there's something greater going on. Maybe those are our ability to describe this is based on culture and our human language. But maybe there's so much more going on. And that's what I think, personally, about the Uinta Basin.
And in the current world, there have been people that have contacted me about seeing beams coming from under the ground, they say, out of Uinta. And I think it's happened in the Sherman Ranch area as well. And people have a hard time trying to even describe, Linda, it looks like beams of light are coming from under the ground, up and out. Did you ever see that, or did anybody in any of the science studies monitor these beams?
Yeah, there's a photograph of it in my film, little Easter eggs all throughout my film, because again, what does it prove? But there's a still photo from a security camera of a fan-shaped series of beams that came up out of the ground. It's something that's reported there all the time, as with the sound of metal on metal, like locomotion grinding under the earth there, as well as disembodied voices just above your head. All of this is reported on a regular basis in the Uinta Basin, particularly surrounding the ranch. It's one of the many, many strange things, like the blue meanies, which are these blue orbs that come in and invoke an unrealistic, an unnatural amount of fear in the brain as it's floating above. These are the things that incinerated the dogs. So all of this has been seen. Now, what have I seen? You know, personally, I am more skeptical when I am there. I personally didn't see, but on the last trip, there was something reported to me. This thing was following me. So apparently the activity is going on out there. I'm just kind of like Inspector Clouseau. I miss it all. I stumble over it. So I didn't see it, unfortunately. Maybe I dodged a bullet. But, I did see lights in the second homestead where there's no artificial light. I don't know what that is. It was from a distance. The whole thing lit up like a Christmas tree. There's no artificial light out there. We went down there. There's nothing there. I don't know what that is. It's lights. So I can't tell you that I've had a car crash-like experience with the phenomenon where beyond a shadow of a doubt I've experienced it. But everybody else has.
Another question I had were those the photos that you showed of those huge scoop marks, 3 to 4 feet in diameter in the pasture.
Right.
Dozens of them, I think, was the quote. Did anybody do soil compression or examination of the surface to see what was capable of doing that huge scoop?
That was very early on, before NIDS was deployed onto the property. So from what I understand, they kind of missed that window of opportunity for those scoop marks. But as you're describing, hundreds of pounds of dirt, no entry point. I mean, there's only one way in and one way out, and the owners didn't see anything. And yeah, so no, I don't think scientific analysis of the scoops were done. However, extensive scientific analysis was done on everything from the mutilations to soil composites to geomagnetic energy to everything. Yeah.
Now, I think either in the film somebody was mentioning, and it was a quote I wrote down, that Robert Bigelow himself had dramatic episodes there. What happened with Robert Bigelow at the Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah, I think that's something that if I had an experience, I'd prefer to tell it myself. So I don't think I'm going to comment on that. But I think what you're talking about is, I think George Knapp kind of intimated that one of the reasons why people would sell the ranch, or Robert Bigelow would sell the ranch, is because George described it to me like you're kind of tempting fate every time you go out there, every time you're trying to hunt the phenomenon. If any of this is true, it's like a virus. It'll attach and spread and to loved ones. And that's what's been reported to me. My most extreme encounter there at the ranch was really with the tribal police, one of the heads of tribal police. And he pulled me aside after kind of shaking me down for permits and said, look, I get what you're doing. You're hunting this thing. He says, but I'm going to warn you now. And he would not go on camera, and he didn't tell this to me to report on it. But he said, I'm going to warn you now. I've seen this before. It knows you're hunting it, and it will hunt you back. And there are ramifications to that. And I've seen it happen, and it's devastating. And as he says that, I kind of see his other officer kind of looking at me, and I could read between the lines. I said, it happened to you, didn't it? And the officer said, yeah, it did. And they described to me one of the most terrifying encounters and how it plagued his life afterwards. And we don't have modern medicine to deal with this type of psychological damage. And he had to.
What happened?
Well, so he was on patrol, and he had always heard about these things, and they do see UFOs. Like, he showed me a video on his cell phone of a huge UFO over the basin. Wouldn't give it to me. Said maybe one day. But, they have these encounters all the time. But he says, we don't seek it out. It's like a car crash. It just happens. So there he is on patrol, sitting in his car. He looks up, and he says there's a giant bipedal kind of wolf hunching over in the middle of the road. And it notices him. He notices it. For about 2 minutes, he looks at it, pops on his siren and lights. The thing gently stands up, walks off into the forest. I said, well, how big is big? And he points to his police cruiser, which was a huge SUV. And he says, bigger than that. And he was dead serious. And it sounds comical. It sounds like a comic book. Anyway, what happened after? He said, it attached to me. It followed me. It started to harass my family. It would creep outside my house. He goes, I don't know how to explain it. And it's not like the first time I've heard this. I heard this from DIA guys, from all sorts of scientists involved with this, that this can happen. So that's what he reported. They had a shaman come in. They actually had a shaman on deck for us if we encountered. One night I spent out in a high activity area right next to the ranch by Bottle Hollow, and they had a guide with me. And if anything encountered us, they had a shaman on deck. They take it very seriously. And I'm not one to question their style. So anyway, nothing bad happened to me that night. But yeah, that was his concern, Linda. He took it very seriously and still does. Yeah.
And what about illness? It seemed to me that a part of your film was implying that people think that their cancers and early deaths and all are related to interaction with the phenomenon.
Yeah, I'm not implying that. I'm saying that. Yeah, very clearly. I ran into a number of incidents, and I documented one right there that tells of, well, actually two, that tells of physical illness after getting hit with a light from above. So the woman in the film named Janice, she has a son who came down with MS right after being hit with this light. And it was very concerning to her, because did he get this just on his own, or is this a product of being hit with the light? And the reason she's asking that is because her direct neighbor, who died of a very, very rare brain cancer, within 10 months of being hit with one of these lights that so deeply burned his skin that he jumped into the river and just started splashing the mud on his face to cool down, went to her house the next day and was just so red. It was like a thick, swollen, his face was like a pad. And that kind of thing not only happened to him, but a couple other individuals in the local community that everybody knows about. So the question lingers, very real. It's very tangible. It's very real. The question lingers. Are these tragedies we're having, these medical tragedies, are these associated with getting hit with these lights? And they don't know. And they don't know if it's government, or they're questioning, is it alien? They don't know.
And it could be microwave, it could be terahertz. And John is the one who brought terahertz into the Rendlesham Forest discussion with what happened to his heart. And did terahertz come into any of the discussions with the scientists?
I mean, I wouldn't say specifically that term has come in. People are obviously, this guy got hit with some sort of what you'd consider like a microwave. Whatever the hertz was of that, we don't know. There's no way to study that now. But the point is that, obviously there is some sort of mechanism to create this injury to people.
What do the Utes and the Navajo think that the skinwalker wants?
Fascinating question, and I would not even pretend to begin to be able to speak for the Ute tribe that in that area. I don't know. I don't know. I think from their culture, I think it's just from what I've been told, it's an entity, an intelligence that takes on many forms, that lives there, has lived there longer than them, and that they respectfully co-inhabit with it.
And from all of the interviews that you did, like with Eric Davis and with Combe and others that were there operating from a scientific point of view, was there anything that occurred that the scientists themselves were especially impressed by?
Yeah, well, I think, George did a lot of great interviews, especially with Eric Davis, Dr. Eric Davis, like during the investigations. And I think that the whole thing was perplexing. From what I understand from everybody that I've talked with, the whole thing was perplexing. They were coming at it trying to get some baseline understanding of what is generating this type of activity we call high strangeness. And I think they failed. I think they couldn't use science as a way to properly describe what's going on there, which in my sense, it's very hopeful for me. I think that's very cool. I think that makes us expand how we look at these types of phenomena. Look, if we all had a perfect photograph or a perfect video of these entities and intelligences or these spaceships, the mystery would kind of be over on one sense, or maybe people just wouldn't accept it. So I don't think there's any piece of evidence that is core or key. I think the whole thing is evidence. I think the whole thing, the whole story, even the witness testimony is so important, because we use witness testimony in murder trials. So being able to assess if this testimony is valid or not, who is talking, what is the testimony, is it told from multiple perspectives, is so valuable to us. And I think we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we should look at witness testimony as evidence. But I don't know, Linda. It's all perplexing, isn't it?
Well, and does it relate directly to advanced aerospace threat identification program that Luis Elizondo introduced a year ago? In other words, is threat there not because it is trying to leverage money from Congress, but does DIA, NSA, CIA, NRO, do they really consider that we are dealing with something that really is a threat?
Okay, well, let's back. That word is really polarized, and that's intentional. And so let's talk about that. When I was under the radar dealing with the Nimitz UFO case for 2 years prior to the New York Times, talking with Commander Fravor and about 12 other witnesses to the event of high rank, some of them, okay? When I was doing that work quietly, silently, everybody referred to the objects as AAVs, anomalous aerial vehicles. The moment this gets into the press, everybody changed the acronym. Anomalous aerial threats, AATs. Now, why, Linda? Why do they do that?
Why?
Well, I mean, like you said, isn't that a great way to get funding? Oh, we're being threatened. Let's get some funding. So in my opinion, that is pure. If they were a threat, we would have known by now, So in my opinion, this is absolutely to invoke financial gain, However, I do understand the basic premise that anything unidentified is considered a threat by our United States military until determined otherwise. And that has been directly stated by Lou Elizondo to try to explain that to people. So I do think it's both. I think it's very powerful to use the word threat. There are certain words that are key words, and I think that's a great one.
Can I bring up a couple points to that?
Yeah, of course.
That could go the other way. Okay, number one, Project Condign identified the fact that through the study, there have been aircraft that have been affected and possibly brought down by this. You have early reports that we actually may be engaged at some point, some of these phenomena, whatever it is, and aircraft were, brought down. Okay. You talk about the fact that people that were studying this phenomena were followed by it. Okay. And may be affected by it. Okay.
That's what's reported to me. Yeah.
Okay. And that is actually some of the DIA guys may have been affected by this after they were there. Okay?
Yeah. That was reported directly to George Knapp.
Okay. You have the police officer telling you that this thing, if you start hunting it or you start trying to figure it out, you're going to have a problem with it, right?
That was reported to me by him, yes.
Okay. So, in essence, if in fact Condign is true and it identifies aircraft were brought down or could affect aircraft, these early reports that Linda's talked about before on the show about how certain aircraft engagements took place where aircraft may have been brought down, then it would be a threat.
Oh yeah, I think that's the whole point. The whole point is we don't know yet. But I mean, if you talk with Commander Fravor, he doesn't tell the whole story. I did tell the story before he went public, and then everybody backed off of it. But we're talking about active jamming, the idea that his weapon systems, which is intimately integrated to his optic systems of radar, were essentially shut down. So if that is true, which he backs off from now, I mean, as a friend, I'm not going to push him on it. But if that is true, yeah, he admitted on the interview I did with him, that is an aggressive action. That is a threatening action. So by nature, I will agree with you that these things should be looked at as threats. And I think it's a good point the military makes. I also think it really helps with funding. But yes, that is the point. Until we know these things, although they seem benign, although they seem to want to do their stuff, in general, they're not bombing us or shooting down our craft. So what is the real threat? The real threat in the military perspective is near misses. And that is a legitimate point. I will tell you this. In 2015 alone, there were over 15 events on the East Coast of what you'd call the gimbal or the Tic Tac. That is fact. We'll see if that comes out. But think about that. There have been so many engagements, military engagements with these things, that they are literally getting in the way of our deployments, as we saw both with the Tic Tac experience and then also as we're learning about the 2015 gimbal experience. So the point is, these things are flying with impunity in our airspace. They are engaging some of our craft directly. And
are they engaging us or are we engaging them?
Right. Well, that's the point. So if we're coming, it's kind of, I think Lou Elizondo said it perfect. He's like, let's say you see a dog off in the distance and you're like, that dog might be a threat. And kind of like as you keep walking, the dog notices you and brings its head up to look at you and you're feeling a little more threatened. That's something he described. That is what happened on all of these engagements. We are seeing things in the air that we need to maneuver around. We will then go check them out. When we check them out, there is a response. Now, they're not shooting down our craft or anything like that, but that response can seem threatening to us.
Well, here's some
with radar. Can interfere with radar.
Oh, not can. It's so deep, Linda. Check this out. So not only in the Tic Tac experience with Commander David Fravor am I personally telling you there was active jamming, okay? But additionally, and I think it's underreported, what happened is this Tic Tac object, it moved after it disappeared to what's called the cap point, which is where Commander Fravor was going to fly to. So the flight controller who was reading in on this, he's like, you're not going to believe it. The object has moved to your cap point where you're going to go to. Now, that was an encrypted communication every 15 minutes that has changed the encryption. So what we have here is you're going to love this. We have an object that was able to go to a future point. We have three options, okay? One is that it somehow decrypted our most powerful United States government encryption software to be able to hear where the cap point is. Or two, it read somebody's mind.
Right, like David Fravor.
Right. Or three, what we're witnessing is an effect of temporal dislocation. We are witnessing an object at a cap point because in the future it knew to go there. So we have three really interesting.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem I have. Okay, according to what they said, the Nimitz did was they ignored what was going on until the day of the flight operations. They sent aircraft out there. You're saying Commander Fravor said that it screwed with the radars. And after all that happened, they turned around and went back and said, well, they're not bothering us, so we're just going to go on with daily operations.
Yeah, that's not at all what happened. I mean, that, you know, that is kind of, I guess how it can be seen. There are so many layers to this. It was being seen, you know, 9 days before Commander Fravor was sent there. He was the individual with closest proximity, you know, to the object itself. You know, he saw it move like a ping pong ball in an empty glass. You know, obviously that's a gravitational propulsion system. There's nothing that we're seeing time-space distortion with the way that this thing operates. It had no propulsion. He comes back. On one level, what can they do? But remember this. It was being picked up by a number of agencies before Commander Fravor went out there. This was picked up on multiple different types of radar, such as the Spy 1. This was all picked up. This was a known event within certain circles. But again, it's so compartmentalized. They're not going to tell, you know, the commander of a flight squadron exactly what's going on. They're just going to tell him to go and engage something, or at least intercept it.
And Jeremy, I wrote down what I think was one of the most fascinating sentences in your entire film. And we have about 2 or 3 minutes left. And this is the quote about Robert Bigelow, or from him, that he wants to, quote, take the elite off planet Earth, close quote.
No. He never said that he wanted to take the elite off planet Earth.
Well, I wrote this down from your film. What is this concept of taking elite off planet Earth?
No, that was something that George Knapp was saying. He's heard the craziest things about Robert Bigelow, such as he wanted to take the elite off the Earth. So it was like George was saying he's heard the craziest things about Robert Bigelow and what his intentions are, that he's in the tea business. He wants to take the elite off of Earth. He was just going through the litany of things that people say against Robert Bigelow. But ultimately, Robert Bigelow he was a fan of UFO stuff, wanted to learn more. He bought this ranch. It got in over his head. It was crazy. It went far beyond. And then he manned up and started, you know, getting into it and trying to understand it. So just to backtrack, Linda, Robert Bigelow didn't say that. That was something that George Knapp said is a criticism of Robert Bigelow that isn't true. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think it comes across as if it is a goal.
I am not the best filmmaker on the planet. You know, I'm a good filmmaker. I try my best. I have had some miscommunications in the past about my films. However, I do want to focus on film for 1 second. So in these last minutes, let me just say something, right? Which is that, the medium is the message here. I'm flying by the seat of my pants trying to make films about this really important stuff. You know, there's a lot of power in cinema in general. And the idea to convince somebody of some binary reality, like this is true or that is true, that is not my point with films. I think that's a big mistake or a missed opportunity or lack of vision or understanding. You know, film should work on you slowly. It's like an exorcism. You know, it grabs you by the guts and it compels and it polarizes you. It provokes you, or at least it can. And I think that this film, Hunt for the Skinwalker, has done that. You can see that by social media. I've never, as I said before, I've never received more physical threats and insane emails. You know, obviously people are talking about it. The idea right now that I really want people to engage is that, you know, this story really gives us a glimpse, a window into something that actually happened, that there are government agencies studying this. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you don't want to engage this topic. Your audience, your fans, of course they're going to want to. Of course they're going to want to look into this. So watch the movie for yourself. Watch it slowly. This is not Ancient Aliens. This is not some TV show that's fly by the seat of the pants trying to jam an idea down your throat. I'm trying to show you in long-form journalism through film, something powerful happened, and it continues to happen. And it's up to us to figure out what that is.
And Jeremy Corbell, thank you for being here on Phenomenon Radio with one of the, I would say, higher strange journeys. And yet, the bottom line is 3 rounds of scientists, 3 rounds of technology. It's so eerie, and yet scientists would like to be able to understand it so they could duplicate it. And that is the irony of the Skinwalker Ranch.
It is the irony, and it's all connected to the modern day announcements that you learned in 2017 of December. Keep an open mind, look at it, and be ready for more work. I will be breaking December 3rd of this year, 2018, the ultimate Bob Lazar documentary. So get ready for that.
And come back on Phenomenon Radio.
Of course. You have a history with Lazar like you do, Skinwalker Ranch. We're going to do it. We're going to do it, man.
Let's all work together. And Ray, take it away.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Linda. You've been listening to Phenomenon Radio Live with Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or program content without express written permission from the KGRA, Linda Moulton Howe, or John Burroughs is strictly prohibited. The Phenomenon Radio Show, in direct cooperation with the internet website earthfiles.com. Ladies and gentlemen, for John Burroughs, Linda Moulton Howe, I am Race Hobbs, thanking Jeremy Corbell so much for taking the time to come on the program tonight. We look forward to having him back in the near future. Very talented filmmaker and very informative. What a great show. Thank you all for listening, everyone. Stay tuned for 3 hours because Jimmy Church is going to be live with Fade to Black right here on Fader Night on the station that is your contact for the very best paranormal UFO talk radio on the planet. We're KGRAradio.com. Have a great night and a great weekend, everybody.